So that's the first panel discussion, which we will do half online, half offline. So I'm very curious if this works. So actually, thanks you two for your presentation. Of course, I think Commerzbank and Deutsche Börse, that's of course one of the largest financial organizations in Germany. It's astonishing that Deutsche Bank is missing in the scene since years. Right? It's a little bit...
They have started now.
They have started,
yeah,
yes.
I had some discussions with them lately as well. They seem to up their game.
It's coming, definitely, yes, but you already have an advantage with Commerzbank being there since a couple of years. Michael Spitz has driven this since years, Paul Kammerer at that time. You are picking this up now at Deutsche Börse.
Well, we trained Simon and then they snatched him from us at Deutsche Börse.
I cannot complain.
Yeah, and this leads to the position that you are now head of digital assets at Deutsche Börse, you are head of digital assets at Commerzbank, and then we have up here Matthew from Settlemint from the Netherlands, and we have here Raphael Polanski from Börse Stuttgart. Maybe Raphael, you also please present yourself quickly. I hope this works technically. And also, Matthew, please also present yourself quickly because we don't know you yet from previous presentations. Would this be okay? And let's hope that the technology works.
That would be perfect. So, good morning, everyone. I hope everybody hears me. My first hybrid panel. So again, front running, and I'm looking forward to this discussion. Shortly to my person, Raphael Polanski, working at Börse Stuttgart for 2 years now, and I'm the managing director of Börse Stuttgart Digital Ventures and Börse Stuttgart Blocknox. Börse Stuttgart Blocknox is the custodian of Börse Stuttgart, so we store the cryptos for Bison and BSDEX. And Börse Stuttgart Digital Ventures is the mother company over Sova Labs, Bison, and Blocknox.
Okay, thanks. And Matthew?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thanks for having me. And similarly, this is my first hybrid panel, so let's see how it goes. I've been in the blockchain space since 2014 or so. First working for a Belgian bank called KBC, where I led the capital markets side of the blockchain labs that were being set up back in those days. 2016 started a company called Settlemint, and Settlemint is really focused on making, let's say, adoption of blockchain technology or integration with existing systems as easy as possible. So we have a blockchain platform as a service that's used, has been used in the past by some of the panel members here. I'm not sure if you were on board back in 2017. In your respective organizations, but worked with Commerzbank and Börse Stuttgart together with T0 back in 2017, 2018-ish. In the early days, since then, more recently working with Standard Chartered for asset tokenization out in Singapore and a couple of other initiatives as well. So very excited to be here and thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thanks very much. So we have 3 regulated companies sitting here and 1 company providing infrastructure technology for capital markets of the future. Settlemint is also active in Asia, providing and servicing their technology there. I think in Germany it's not perfectly well known yet, but that's exactly what Settlemint is changing. Now, I think Commerzbank already inspected the technology a couple of years ago, so, as far as I know. So it's good to have you here in this panel. And of course, sitting in Belgium, it was not easy to come to Germany, but we will change this next time, Matthew, then we will have the conference physically again. So we would like to talk about digital securities. The presentations previously have foreshadowed this topic already. We see movements of large-scale financial organizations and we see regulation coming. This has been nicely illustrated by both of the presentations previously. We had a chat yesterday and you emphasized that you are head of legacy custody, if I can say this, right? That's not on your business card.
The boring old part, which actually makes money, and then the new part, which hopefully in the future generates a revenue stream for the bank, yes.
So you're head of legacy custody, if I can say this, and you're head of digital assets for the future. But yesterday you told us, surprisingly, that you do not have time for the future at this point of time because of the volatility in the markets is so high, such that this keeps you busy with the legacy stuff. Maybe you explain your situation quickly.
So I explain the situation. So So it seems I have two businesses. I have a custody business and a direct market access business. In that direct market access business, I have other banks, for example, using our pipes or machine to trade at Deutsche Börse, at Börse Stuttgart, so all friends in the room here, to trade their securities through us and keep it in our custody account. For some reason, people, since the lockdown, seem to be very engaged in equity trading. So we have volumes doubling with our clients, and it's really, it's going crazy. We don't have a Robin Hood kind of movement as we have in the States, in Germany yet. But if I look at the movement, the volatility in the market, and the increasing assets valuation, there is a lot going on, and I have a record year. So I try to spend as much time as I can on the new world, but actually there's a lot to be done in the old world. But again, it pays for the new one, right? So it's a little bit of a time trade-off, but I try to make as much time as possible and have some conversations along the way. And that's why I say, if you're interested to talk about an ecosystem in Germany and then potential Europe, come talk to me.
This is what we also discuss in the next 20 minutes. We also discussed yesterday quickly, Raphael was also on the line telling that the future will be digital assets and digital securities, but at this point of time, there are no digital assets and digital securities out there. So what would you work on, right? You are working on building the future. You cannot sell the future yet.
I have to sell the future internally, to get the money from the people who have to earn it right now. Advantage from my side is I can focus on the new stuff. And no, but we have to build this. And
other people pay, you mean?
Yeah, always other people pay you, Ben, So I think right now, the thing is for infrastructure, it's a long-term road, right? If you want to build a highway, you have to start quite early, And you have to invest. That's the whole idea of infrastructure. And we have seen infrastructure all over Europe through the decades, and it always takes time to invest. It takes then a long time, and then you have something you have to build on. And in Deutsche Börse Group, for example, we have now stable business models because we have invested in infrastructure and have the experience to in a trusted environment operate this. So of course, if we want to do this in the future with the new stuff, we have to start right now and invest right now.
Excellent. What about Raphael and Matthew? What's your experience? Because apparently Börse Stuttgart has chosen the way to primarily focus on the new world, at least with a couple of business units. Maybe you would also like to express your opinion on this, Raphael.
Sure. It's no secret that Börse Stuttgart took that road pretty early. So when we saw DLT and blockchain, we decided that this will become the future. We do not only believe in cryptocurrencies, which we more or less see as a new asset class, which is interesting for our retail clients, but more in the technology itself. And I think the electronic securities will anyway come. And at that point, I think it is important to understand the technology and to build experience in-house in all different ways. This is why we decided that we want to understand how do you issuance digital tokens? How do you trade them? How do you trade them differently depending on your clients? How do you safekeep them? How do you clear them? How do you deal and work with your partners within your network? Because here, especially in this new technology, you have to invest together with partners. I see what Simon is telling, and on this highway or road example, you don't want the road to end at the border of Germany. You want it to go through until the rest of the world, until the end of Europe, and then you need a bridge or whatever to Asia, and you need a hub in US. So this DLT is a worldwide global technology. So you have to build it up together. So yes, we invested quite early in it. We see cryptocurrencies as first step, and actually it's I can say that of course too. It's a nice revenue case, which again pays off part of the investments you have to do in your infrastructure. But in the end, we do believe that digital securities is the future. So you have to invest pretty early. You have to invest pretty heavily, and you have now to decide with whom you partner.
Yeah, we will discuss the partnering aspect in a second. So, Matthew, what's your impression? You're sitting in Belgium, if I'm right. So what's your perspective in the European capital, so to say, and also what's your outside perspective on the German market, and what are you seeing basically on your desk being a technology provider?
So I think it's kind of mirroring what I'm hearing from the others. I think that investment really pays off from the perspective of understanding what the technology is good for, what parts of the trade life cycle can it be used for, which parts of the trade life cycle is it not useful for. So we've got a lot of experience working in that area and it's, the companies that invest early will not fall into the pitfalls of trying to launch a product on market that is utilizing the DLT technology in a way that's probably suboptimal. There's no DLT technology out there today that can handle millisecond transaction time. So it's matching and execution is something that you need to find a solution for with legacy infrastructure, and it's the companies that have invested early, I think, are in a better position to have a solution that's marketable, and you see that from a European perspective. And if I speak to Belgium, I would say from the regulation in Belgium tends to move a bit slower than other parts of Europe. Germany seems to be on quite far ahead in my view, in terms of making conducive regulation to a more efficient future for the capital markets. In other parts of the world, Singapore is a really front runner in this type of thing as well. So there's a lot of I think Europe is quite well positioned. Singapore is also moving quite quickly ahead, and I think other parts of the world will follow. But I think the companies that are investing now, the existing market infrastructure providers that are experimenting with the technology, will be in a good position to deliver solutions in the future.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit more about digital securities. In case you would like to work with blockchain technology at this point of time, you sooner or later end up with Bitcoin right now. So what BaFin has created, that's my personal opinion, is basically a Bitcoin license, not a digital asset license, if you measure the numbers right now. And this will turn, once the market is increasing, towards a digital asset license automatically, because you are all working on these topics. Now, you have also presented that Germany has proposed a new legal framework for digital securities, and then quite soon after, the European Commission has proposed their DLT pilot regime for securities. So do we have some hype in this area already happening here? That's a question to all of you, because you could basically start in Germany with digital security soon and then expand to the entire European Union with 450 million people in one unified way. Does this logic make sense, creating some dynamic, or is it basically too early, or is this a wrong logic?
No, I think it's called a competitive advantage through regulation. So nationally, our regulator was very smart and started to look at the topics very early on. And we find out that in the ministry, there are actually quite smart people who really know the technology and just not driven by the markets, but have their own ideas. And I think they developed very early on a very clear vision for the market. And now we in Germany actually have the ability and have to pick up that ball we're given and do something with it, because we can start creating something which will later go into a European regime. And as I pointed out earlier in my presentation, I believe there will be national little allegiance built their own DLT solutions,
like alliances.
Alliances. Sorry, and go ahead and will then move into Europe. And then it's like in any other digital economy. If you have supply, if you have demand, and you have a good technology, you will win. And I think that's a very important aspect. I think everybody has to keep in mind is it's not only us here in Germany doing it, but many other players, and we just have to find a way to work together, because it's a very short period of time.
You mean that's the 2-3 years until this potential pilot regime is getting enforced, right?
Yeah, but you have to have something running then already if you want to expand it. So it's not a few years you have, but maybe it's a year, you should be starting to deploy something. And I think that's very important, and I think that's an important message for the market. Can we manage to work together in a short period of time? And there are certain aspects which are difficult. Banks don't invest as much currently. Maybe we can get Deutsche Börse or Börse Stuttgart to invest a bit more, but we have the clients and we have the volume. So I think that's the aspects we have to look at as an industry and find a solution how to position ourselves here in Germany to use that regulatory advantage for then the pan-European solution.
Completely fair, Ben, and I think we have now started to invest. Yeah, I can say that. And I think what is necessary here is really to look at a scalable level to invest now, because we have done a lot, POCs, transactions, so on, all good, all fine. But for our approach now, this is really about changing the core of it. So for us, it's really a kind of an alternative of new systems to our existing legacy systems. Yeah, not completely shifting as others have done. We want to integrate. Why? Because for us, this is really the heart of our infrastructure, is the safekeeping. Yeah? And if you do a heart surgery, you don't plug it out and put in a new one, but you do this in a minimum invasive approach. Yeah?
And you want to keep the revenue stream, I fully understand.
That is what you say. Yeah? So you have to really precisely have a look at what you replace and start replacing what is necessary, and then let this grow naturally. This is our approach. Yeah? And we start building now this infrastructure components very precisely and specifically and integrate it into our existing IT architecture. That's what we are currently working on. It's not doing another network where you can do a POC. It's really having a look at where you start with the implementation with very, very specific functionality and parts of the value chain, and then have a specific plan how you grow this out, but in a way that it's being directly integrated into existing infrastructure, because thereby, as I told before in the presentation, we can leverage existing infrastructure and get access to secondary markets completely. Yeah? So it's a completely a new kind of infrastructure that you start implementing in a way that it has access to existing liquidity pools and markets.
So that explains why it takes a little bit of time. Deutsche Börse is apparently not a Berlin-style crypto startup, right?
Sadly not really, yeah.
Excellent. Of course, it takes time. Raphael and Matthew, you want to add something on this? About the pilot regime, the European way to DLT markets and so on?
Yeah, the thing I would maybe drawing a slightly different example, but if you look at what happened with GDPR and how all companies need to comply with that now, Germany got a head start on that as well. I think Germany was 5 to 10 years ahead of most of Europe in terms of data protection. And so the lift from as a company to be compliant with GDPR when the regulation came out at European level was presumably quite low in Germany, whereas in other parts of Europe it took quite a lot of work to get caught up and up to speed to make sure that GDPR compliance could be met. And I think that will be mimicked with crypto assets. That if Germany is moving ahead first, will that mean that Germany is best positioned to offer pan-European solutions? Maybe. But it certainly will mean that infrastructure providers that are German will have very little lift to get into a European framework.
I think that's a good point, and I would only like to emphasize what Benjamin said. We have to be way more aggressive than we are today with our investments. I totally agree that in 12 months we need to deploy something. I would even go further. In 12 months, we all need a running up solution, because you can only deal with this wave in 3 ways. You can ignore it. I wouldn't. I don't think anybody should do that. The second one is you can try to integrate new solutions in your existing infrastructure, which is important for, of course, players that are already there, like Deutsche Börse, so totally a good approach, or you build it up from scratch new. But the important thing is do it, and like now, because otherwise you have a problem.
But that's
because it's coming, and yeah.
That's a controversy to pitch. What I would ask you, Raphael. should I join you and do an alliance with you and use your MTF license to start a pan-European solution, or should I join the internal DLT solution of Deutsche Börse? And I think that's the discussion
or you
to be had.
join BNP Paribas in France or Santander in Spain.
So I think that's the solution. But if you go to another country, then you have the problem you're currently regulated in Germany. So we issue German securities. All bearer bonds are by German issuers, or many times German issuers, but at least under German law. And I think the discussion to be had is, do we join a closed system by Deutsche Börse Clearstream, or do they open up? Do you guys want to start something and say, look, join my alliance, I have an MTF license which will fly under the new European pilot regime, and we can do that? Or do we all sit together and find a new infrastructure and solution? And I think that's a discussion we have to have in a very short period of time, because otherwise we will end up with very limited network effects and then do not have this scale possibility, because then every bank would join Simon, but then would also join BNP Paribas and the French initiative maybe, or another one. So I think it's either you are part of the system, as we were in the old days when Clearstream was founded, or you just are a client, and then it's a very different dynamic and effects, and then we could lose the advantage we have in Germany.
That's an interesting strategic point which you are mentioning. It's basically at this point of time nowhere happening in the discussions, right? Because it's a tiny piece right now, but you're right, the law will come into force depending on the law. Some of the laws next time, then 2022, 2023. And what we see with the crypto license, which has been come into force in January, we saw that nothing happened in Q1 and Q2, right? Of course, you started with RFPs and discussing with custody providers, and now very slowly dynamic is happening. But of course, decision makers in your organizations first wanted to observe how is the law turning out, does it make sense, and so on. And now it can be different because the law, DLT pilot regime and the MiCA regime and all the other ones will come into force 2022, 2023, and you can expect this, so you can start building infrastructure now, here and there, but the law is changing. It's a moving target, right? And ideally, like in the pharmaceutical industry, once the deadline is there, one day after you could theoretically go live. You know, I know that this is theoretically.
But let's be precise on the regulations that we are discussing. The pilot regime is something that is quite limited in terms of its volume and stuff like that. But it's a pilot regime that's being put in place, assumed to be 2023, then running for 5 years. So until 2028, this is the timeline. The scope is quite limited. So to be honest, when we internally review now all these kinds of regulations, we are also considering maybe just trying to apply the changes in MiFID II and a solution that is compliant with existing MiFID II, rather than going for a pilot regime with volume restrictions of 500 million euros, which is even less than one big issuance in the debt space, right? And so you can do, I would say, it's great for the small players and to do the innovation stuff, indeed, but for large players, the pilot regime is not really an alternative, I would say.
Okay, interesting perspective. And you want to add something, Matthew or Raphael? Or Benjamin?
I would only ask the question, maybe that is in purpose. Maybe the 500 million limitation is a purpose of the regulator to just test it in smaller scale on the one side. And on the other side, giving new players the opportunity building up a business while not touching the existent and working, I don't say monopoles, it's more duo or oligopoles within the different countries. And I mean, there's a reason why we have those structures right now in the classical world. And there's a reason why we're pushing forward this new technology to try and find out something new. So maybe this is the purpose of it. But now, again, there should be a fifth person from BaFin or Duve or whoever, maybe explaining that in more detail. But they will probably not do it. So let's keep guessing.
Excellent. I think we have, unfortunately, to close this round because we have to move on with the agenda. I have 2 more questions which we cannot answer now, but we will do this then in the next rounds, months, years. And the first question would be, yes, the European Commission created this pilot regime starting 2023, but Börse Stuttgart, for example, is showing that there is already a pilot regime on DLT which you can work with. This is called crypto assets, right? So you can exercise custody and all kinds of other stuff technologically exactly the same way with crypto assets. You do not have to wait for the European Commission on this, and then you can exercise without these limitations mentioned by Simon. And another question is, I'm now entirely confused if I should purchase Commerzbank stocks, Deutsche Börse stocks, or Bitcoin, actually.
Just look at the historic performance. Sorry for that.
I'm not legally allowed, I think, here to give any investment advice. That's what I always learned. But I mean, your question, quick answer to your question is maybe crypto is a gateway drug to DLT for traditional organizations.
Yeah, that's a quite interesting hypothesis we should explore further. Is Bitcoin and Ethereum the bridge towards digital assets in the future, and those who take this bridge can make it, or is there a way around Bitcoin and still doing digital assets? Let's make this the topic of the next panel. Okay, thank you very much, and then we proceed now in the agenda with 2-3 more presentations. We now talk about, again, tokenizing securities, and we have Jacek Czernicki here from Denmark. I think he's working on a startup called Fountain, that's asset trading of the future, and he's also working at MakerDAO, that's one of the largest crypto projects with the stablecoin DAI.
Thank you, Philipp.
Thanks.